Hey Twisters, so for this video, I'm ranking the teams with the most difficult offseason ahead here in 2023. Yeah, the NHL draft is just around the corner, and so is free agency, and there are going to be teams that are looking to make a lot of trades out there because the free agency market isn't all that great. So I figured we'd spotlight 10 teams with the most difficult offseason ahead with all those factors into consideration. I did see some comments from you guys, and I want to make sure that I spotlight some of those. And of course, let me know your thoughts about my list here in the comments down below. Before I get into this, just some honorable mentions, right? So Ottawa Senators, right, with the Alex DeBrincat situation and their goaltending going forward. The Minnesota Wild, they still are looking for that true number one center. Marco Rossi is supposed to be that guy, but maybe he still needs a little bit more time to develop and ramp up from there. The Devils and the Hurricanes have lots of free agents, although the Devils just did a sign and trade for Damon Severson, getting a third-round pick from the Blue Jackets. The Predators, new GM, new head coach, and really an open canvas with this team. I'm excited to see what they can do with it, but I don't think it's necessarily the most difficult because they don't have the most pressure necessarily to get back deep into the playoffs. I would say that if I had to assign an 11 and a 12 on this list, it would be the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Vancouver Canucks because they're both facing some of the tightest cap situations in the NHL. All right, let's begin the countdown at number 10. I've got the Colorado Avalanche, just 1 year removed from the Stanley Cup final. You still have prime McKinnon, you still have prime Rantanen, you have an excellent defense core. So they have lots of those pieces in place for next year to potentially make a deep run. However, they're going to be without Gabriel Landeskog. Also, we've seen that the team kind of lacks that true number two center as well as somebody like Compher has played for them. They are kind of missing that void that Nazem Kadri had previously filled. They currently have about $20 million in cap space with the Landeskog situation factored in, but they have lots of free agents, especially in the forward group. There is JT Compher, and I would think he's looking for a pretty good pay raise. Alex Newhook is a restricted free agent. Evan Rodriguez, although his contracts are always a bargain. Darren Helm, Matt Nieto, Andrew Cogliano, Lars Eller, some more experienced veterans out there. Also, they have to sign Bowen Byram, and you have to consider that the defense, you have somebody like Sam Girard being paid $5 million. So would Byram warrant that sort of contract? I would think so, especially with what he's able to do offensively. And I'm wondering, if they really want to address their center need going forward, they would probably have to make a trade since free agency isn't quite as rich. So could we possibly see them shopping one or two of their defensemen? Somebody like Devon Taves, as much as I like him and wouldn't want him to leave the Avs, he has 1 year left on his deal at $4 million. So I think the Avs could get something big in return if they want to make upgrades to their forward group. Now we get to ninth on my countdown, and I've got the New York Rangers. Of course, they're looking to fill the void that Gerard Gallant leaves behind, so they are looking for a head coach, and they have some big decisions ahead, right? They have Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko as UFAs, and of course, Kane is going to miss as much as the start of next season. Could be out a month, could be out 6 weeks there. So for someone who's been paid over $10 million over the past several seasons, would they want to take some sort of gamble on him for a shorter term deal? Tarasenko coming off a $7 million deal of his own. How much is he worth that sort of value for the Rangers going forward? Nico Mikkola, Tyler Mott, a couple of other notable free agents. And don't forget, you've got Keandre Miller, who I think is due for a good pay raise. He did put up 43 points last season for a team that has Adam Fox. And in terms of his defensive fundamentals, he's one of my favorites to watch out there. And when you look at the top six, even without Kane and Tarasenko, they can still be very skilled. However, I think that there might be a bigger need for someone like Hedl or Kakko or Lafreniere to have a bigger role in that group going forward. I think that certainly you have skilled veteran players, but you also need some of that youth to come in and actually be more physical, to be able to dig pucks out of the corner better. So I am kind of interested to see how the Rangers sort of put their roster together as we get closer to the start of next year. Now, in my season predictions, I actually had the Rangers going to the Cup final, and they were supposed to lose to the Calgary Flames. So expose the garbage season predictions here. Jonathan here is a Flames fan, and he thinks that the offseason will be kind of tough. They do have a new general manager in Craig Conroy. He was previously their assistant general manager, and also they're looking to fill the void that Daryl Sutter leaves behind after he was fired. So right now, I'm hearing that the front runner could be Ryan Huska, who was an assistant for 5 years. Gerard Gallant is another name out there, speaking of the Rangers. So really what I wonder here is, will a new coach, will he alone be able to gel with these players in the way that Sutter kind of did when he initially arrived to the team, in order for certain players to bounce back in that lineup? Specifically, of course, Jonathan Huberdeau, whose 8-year deal kicks in this season, and Andrew Mangiapane, a very disappointing season after what he did the previous year. And even though I don't think defense is the key issue here, they are going to lose a lot of veteran defensemen over the next couple of off seasons. And you need the defense to be able to play about as strong as it did 2 seasons ago, because last season, Jacob Markstrom is getting a little bit older, by the way, 33 years old. Last season, he was not particularly good, just an .892 save percentage and a 2.92 goals against average. But really, I think the Flames offseason starts with the new coach that comes in and how he and the GM sort of establish their vision for the team and just kind of determine whether or not those current players, no matter how much they're being paid, are compatible with how they want to build a successful team going forward. In 7th, I had the Pittsburgh Penguins. A couple of you actually think that they have one of the most difficult off seasons ahead. Kyle Dubas, of course, comes in as the president of hockey operations, and he's looking to hopefully hire a GM by around the time of the NHL draft, so in the next couple of weeks. Now, he's made some great moves, including during the trade deadline, getting Ryan O'Reilly, getting Sam Lafferty, Noel Acciari, for not all that much. So he had a good trade deadline at the beginning of his career, right? You know, a young dude coming into that role. You think of like the Nazem Kadri trade, they didn't get nearly enough in return. So with these GMs or hockey ops guys, right, they do have mixed bag, right? There's no perfect GM out there as good as Sakic and Yzerman can be. They have a projected $20 million in cap space, but when you look at their free agents, they need a lot of help in kind of building a new bottom six for this team. You still have great veterans on the team, but as we've seen with the Penguins the past couple of years, as good as Crosby and Malkin can be and Jake Gensel, everybody else needs to step up. There needs to be another dimension for the rest of that core in the middle six or in the bottom six. I really like the way that Raquel has been playing. Jason Zucker could be a piece of that equation. He was finally healthy this year, and he put together a really good campaign. So will they be able to make room for him? On defense, Brian Dumoulin is a UFA, and I don't know if he will be able to come to terms with an affordable deal for the franchise going forward, as good as he's been over the course of his career in Pittsburgh. And Tristan Jarry is also a UFA as well. So when you think of signing Jarry and Zucker, that only leaves so much open for the bottom six. So anyway, they got to find a way to turn this around quickly, just given that Crosby and Malkin are getting a little bit older, Letang as well. In 6th, it's basically the same situation for them. I've got the Washington Capitals, right? They, of course, have only 3 years left of Alex Ovechkin's deal. He's getting a little bit older there, and so is the rest of the core. Looking at players like TJ Oshie, looking at players like Evgeny Kuznetsov in his 30s. Tom Wilson's already 30 years old. John Carlson as well. So with the Capitals, I ask, do they have a blueprint for how they're going to succeed in 2024 and compete with some of the speedier teams in that division that are also defensively pretty skilled as well? Teams like the Carolina Hurricanes, teams like the New Jersey Devils, who are tough to generate shots against. And perhaps in order to solve that, they might need to trade 1 or 2 of their veteran players. There's all sorts of trade talk regarding Yevgeny Kuznetsov, 2 years left on his deal at $7.8 million annually. The Caps might need to eat a little bit of salary there. Anthony Mantha has perennially been injured as well, so I could see him potentially being on the move. And then you also look at the prospect pool. It's not the deepest in the NHL. Certainly that's what happens when you're competitive year after year after year like the Penguins are. But maybe next season we see somebody like Connor McMichael have a bigger role at the NHL level, or Hendrix Lapierre as well. You also have Miroshnichenko, but he's still playing in Russia for the next couple of seasons. And like the Rangers and the Flames, the Caps are going to have a new head coach going into next year. This is Spencer Carberry. He was formerly an assistant with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and before that, he coached the Hershey Bears, who have been perennially a very good team in the AHL. Now in 5th, I have a team that I don't think many of you are expecting to even be on this list. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments. I've got the St. Louis Blues. I find their offseason very intriguing. They're 4 years removed from their Stanley Cup championship, and of course, they've lost some players since then, especially this past season with the likes of Ryan O'Reilly. This is a team that just 2 seasons ago, right? They were in a competitive series against the Colorado Avalanche. But with the Blues, I wonder sort of what direction they're going in, and is Craig Berube really part of that vision going forward? He does have to hire 2 new assistants because they were fired last year, and so he was able to hang on to his job. They have defensemen who are all in their 30s for the most part, and generally speaking, I think they could use some more mobility and agility out there. As good as Torrey Krug can be, and Perunovic, he's been kind of a 7th defenseman in the organization. I'd like to see him full-time on that roster. They have only about $7.5 million in cap space, not a lot of room to work with. So Will they be a little bit more aggressive with their trades and sort of tearing things down? Fortunately, though, they have 3 first-round picks and they have 2 third-round picks, so the draft could be potentially good for them. But right now, I wonder, is this team going to be aggressive in the offseason in order to complement the likes of Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas, or do they want to give this some more time? What do they do about goaltending? There are some big question marks with the Blues going forward. In fourth, I have the Edmonton Oilers. Now, with them, you're in the prime of McDavid and Draisaitl's career. How do you build around them? Well, it's going to be particularly difficult for the Oilers this year because they only have about $5.9 million in projected cap space. And that alone, I would think, would go to Evan Bouchard because he was a monster for them down the stretch and in the postseason. He's a great power play quarterback, but you also have some free agents, and those are including players who were good contributors in the postseason, like Clem Costin with his clutch goals, like Nick Bjugstad, who was able to be elevated into the lineup as a second center at times. Ryan McLeod also among that free agency group. So that's going to be an issue in terms of building depth in the roster. Also, the Oilers are lacking a first, a third, a fourth, and a fifth in this year's draft. In third, I have the Boston Bruins. They have maybe the most difficult cap situation in this offseason. Sports Clips here says Boston because it could be a miss for the playoffs without Bergeron and Krejci. Those guys, of course, in the twilight of their careers, we don't know if they're going to sign with them next year. The Bruins have only $5 million in projected cap space. I know that those 2 players took affordable deals to be on the team this year. Could they do that again next year? Even so, the Bruins have to free up cap space. Tyler Bertuzzi and Dmitry Orlov highlight the UFAs on this team. There are several. And you also have Jeremy Swayman, who is an RFA. I would think he gets a pretty good pay bump. And apart from David Pastrnak and Charlie McAvoy, both elite talents, right? What is the core of the Boston Bruins going forward? They don't really have much money to work with in terms of building that core in the offseason. And you also have to remember that they don't have a first or a second round pick this year and also next year. In second, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs, and Matthew here highlights that the Leafs have tons of UFAs, and you're absolutely correct here. And the cap situation is going to be very difficult for them as well. They have about $9 million right now, and you have among their free agents Ryan O'Reilly, Michael Bunting, David Kampf, and Alex Kerfoot. You also have Ilya Samsonov as an RFA. Is he going to be the franchise goaltender going forward? You might have to find a way to move Matt Murray and his $4.7 million. There is probably a team out there that would take on a bad contract in order for you to free up some cap space. And speaking of UFAs, we can't forget that both Austin Matthews and Willie Nylander will be UFAs in 2024. So this team, can they get better with what they have right now in order to retain those guys in the future? They brought in Brad Treliving as their new general manager. And again, just like we were talking about with Dubas, he's made some great moves and he's made some awful moves. I'll just spotlight a couple here. Of course, drafting Matthew Tkachuk. When Adam Fox didn't want to play for the Flames, he was moved with Dougie Hamilton, who's been a great defenseman ever since, for Noah Hanifin and Elias Lindholm, who's worked out very well for the Calgary Flames. The Tyler Toffoli deal hardly cost them anything, and he was the Flames' best player last year. But of course, the bad deals out there, the James Neal signing, the Troy Brouwer signing, the Blake Coleman signing, that was way too much term for him, I thought, and trading a first and 2 seconds for Travis Hamonic. So kind of like Boston, right? This is all about the cup window. How can they extend it with limited resources here? And will they be able to afford some of their top talents going beyond next season? And in first place, I have the Winnipeg Jets, and a couple of you point this out as well. Select a boy, always appreciate your comments. The Jets, after Rick Bowness put them on blast, that's exactly what happened after their Game 5 series losing defeat to the Vegas Golden Knights. But immediately after, Kevin Cheveldayoff said that Bowness is returning for next year, and Cheveldayoff still has a job with his team as well. So really, this team is kind of in an identity crisis. You have Connor Hellebuyck, the franchise cornerstone, Vezina caliber Connor Hellebuyck, saying that he doesn't want to rebuild and that he feels like he's running out of time in his career, even though he's just 30 years old as a goaltender. So the trade rumors are swirling around him. And of course, Pierre-Luc Dubois has requested a trade. Shocker, right? So they're looking to put an end to that saga. So what is this team going forward with the core? They have 1 year left on Blake Wheeler's deal. I could see a buyout coming for him because they would save $5.5 million in cap space, and that would especially help if for some reason they're unable to, move the players I just talked about. The Jets overall have about $12 million in cap space, so they do have some room to work with in terms of building out some more depth. So I'm wondering if this team is able to build around Kyle Connor and Nikolai Ehlers and also Josh Morrissey going forward. And they do have some good prospects as well, like Chaz Lucius and Matthew Savoy, but those guys I think will need a little bit more time to mature, whereas I could see the Jets maybe trading one of their veteran defensemen and freeing up a spot for a good defensive prospect like Ville Heinola. But for the Jets, of course, if you're not going to make those big changes at coaching or general manager, and you still have some of the old guard around and some of your players saying that they're not really keen on staying with the club in the future, how do you turn this around quickly? Because this has been building now for a couple of seasons. Anyway, guys, what do you think of my list? Who did I snub in my top 10? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'm happy to chime in because I did look up other teams as well. Hope you enjoyed this video. Do leave a thumbs up. Shout out any more ideas that you have for future content. Always looking for your feedback, and thanks so much for voting in that poll. That really helped me out, and it was great to see so many of you weighing in on that. Anyway, guys, hope to come at you again real soon with more content covering the offseason. And yeah, I thank you for watching this one. I'm Nick, and I'll catch you Twisters later. Ciao.